to join. We've just gone live. Good morning. We're going to start with our South Asian Cancer panel this morning. I'm going to introduce you to my wonderful panel in a second. Just going to wait for a couple of more people to join because it's not quite 10 o'clock and we're already on a Friday morning, which is slightly wet in London. But thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel, if you go to the comment section, you can actually ask questions and we will try and answer those questions as we continue with the conversation and the discussion. So if you go to comments, it's just underneath the video. I'll be able to see the comments and I'll be able to hopefully look at answering those questions at some point a bit later on. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to some of our panel and the conversation we're going to have. So today we're going to look at the impact of having cancer as a South Asian patient. And we've got some amazing healthcare professionals to give their views on that too, who are from the community, some of whom had cancer, some of whom haven't, just to give us a bit of an insight. We're also going to talk a little bit more about the myths, the taboos, and touch a little bit on the diet and lifestyle. I'm not going to be able to go into it in detail because we don't have time today, but I'm going to be announcing some really interesting collaborations and conversations at the end of this. So please stick with us. Keep listening, keep an open heart and mind, and definitely ask questions. So we're just about to turn to 10 o'clock. So I'm going to introduce my panel in a second. So I'm just going to give you all the names and I'm going to individually introduce you. So we're very lucky to have with us, first of all, my mum. My mum is a breast cancer survivor. She's also a bone health specialist and runs a breast cancer support group. We have Pardeep, who is talking about having breast cancer for the very first time. So please give her a very warm welcome. She's also a pharmacist, so she has some really interesting things to say as being diagnosed with breast cancer at a younger age. We have Gaurav Patel, who is a breast cancer surgeon. She's not had cancer, but she's very knowledgeable in this field and particularly worked with lots of South Asian patients. And last but not least, we have Daksha Trivedi, who is not only a public health epidemiologist, but she's also had esophageal cancer and sadly lost her brother to the same cancer. So brings a lot of personal experience plus her professional expertise of how we can change our health as South Asians to help reduce the risk, because at the moment we're being diagnosed much later. We have much poorer outcomes when it comes to any cancer, let alone whatever we're talking about, and sadly our NHS is not stacked in our favor. So we're going to be talking about all of those things. So I'm going to get you to introduce yourselves. Mum, do you want to introduce yourself, unmute yourself and talk? So if you were to let people introduce yourselves, your name and your cancer, a little about your story.
I am Meena. I'm Thor's mom. I was diagnosed with breast cancer 22 years ago. I had mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and tamoxifen. I've survived, so there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And I run a breast cancer support group in Purley. But I'll talk about it later.
Thanks, Mom. Pardeep, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Pardeep. I was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago at the age of 42. It's the first time today, as Toral said, that I'm talking about it. I'm also a pharmacist. As a healthcare professional, I still think that there's a lot more that we can do about the awareness of breast cancer or other cancers in Asian women and men.
Thank you, Pardeep. Gaurav, do you want to talk a little bit more? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Coral. I'm a consultant oncoplastic breast and reconstructive surgeon. I am really passionate about delivering a holistic service, not just the medical side, but also looking at diet, exercise, lifestyle, and mental well-being of my patients. It's a whole package when you're treating cancer, and I'm very passionate about bringing that to my ladies. I've set up a peer support group for younger women with breast cancer because, as Toral said, there's a huge need for this, that the age, at least in my experience, seems to be getting younger and younger. There's not enough support, I believe, but we're trying to address that. And I'm really, really passionate about breast health awareness. So I do a lot of talks and events to just try and put the message out there about examining yourself, about demystifying, I don't know, is it de-scarifying a word? I might have just made that up, but making people less scared or nervous when thinking about their breast cancer.
Thank you, girl. And Daksha, would you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Hello, good morning. I'm Daksha Trivedi. I'm an academic in public health research. I had esophageal cancer 6 months after my twin brother died of a similar cancer. I'm really passionate about early detection and focusing on well-being, because for my twin brother, his cancer was inoperable. I had a 9-hour surgery. I've lost my esophagus. My stomach's here, but I'm here. I'm here to talk to people. Like Pradeep, I did not talk about my cancer until I wrote my book, which is now Living the Dream: A Tale of Surviving Cancer. And through that, my families and friends got to know about. And I wrote that because I wanted to share the strategies that I had used, just for my well-being, my day-to-day well-being, and to get me where I am. So, hey, it's a journey, and how cultural issues also affected my journey. One thing I have to say, that because my twin brother had died, I was so afraid of my family and friends assuming the worst, that I would also take the same path. So a lot of challenging journey, long-term recovery, but I'm here, and I'm delighted to be on this forum as a way of reaching out, especially in this South Asian Heritage Month. So thank you, Toral, for organizing this.
Thank you so much, Daksha, and thank you to all of you for joining me. And I think it'd be great to share a little bit about my story, because I'm so passionate about nutrition and lifestyle and cancer, and that complete passion started with Mum having breast cancer 22 years ago when I was at medical school. Sadly, I've had breast cancer 3 times now. I was first diagnosed when I was 29, and I've just had a recurrence, which was diagnosed in the second lockdown in the UK, which is in November, and I have had surgery and treatment over the last few months. So I completed active treatment at around Easter time. So I know exactly what it's like to be a cancer patient. But also my work is, I specialize in nutrition and lifestyle. I'm a functional medicine practitioner and a nutritional scientist. And for me, like, how can we give tailored advice to our communities? Because what I've noticed is all the advice that is given is tailored to white Caucasian communities, particularly in the UK. And what we need is tailored advice for people's lifestyle, their family structure, because of some of the other things. So I'm working on creating resources, particularly for the South Asian community, because there's actually very little out there that's really tailored. So I will be sharing a little bit more about that, but I wanted to share kind of my story too. So I'm going to be asking a few questions, and we're going to look at various aspects of having cancer as a South Asian, and then we're going to look at more what can we all do? What actions can we take? How can we work with healthcare professionals? What data needs to be collected? Because all of these things are really important. So first, the question is going to go to Pardeep. The question is, how did your culture impact your cancer diagnosis?
I think it made me want to hide my diagnosis. I felt like I was going to be judged and blamed. So from experience, I'd known a few women in the Indian community that had had breast cancer, and the things that people had said about them was, she got cancer because she did this, and she got cancer because she didn't do this, she didn't go to the temple, it was the food that it's because she drank alcohol. It's not many Indian women drink alcohol. So it was the fear of being judged, and also that blame factor. I didn't feel I'd done anything to deserve my diagnosis, but I knew others would kind of think, oh, it's because she did this. And that's what made me want to hide my diagnosis.
And in hindsight, having hidden it, do you think that if you shared more about it at the time, you would have had more support, or not really? Because, I mean, that's the question, right?
Yeah, I don't think I would. I think I've had a lot of support now that I have spoken to people about it. And I said earlier, I've only really spoken about it in the last month, and that's to family and friends. But I've also had people that have disappeared from my life. And I did say to one of my friends, it's not contagious. You know, there's nothing you can eat, there's nothing you can catch from me that's going to make you have a cancer diagnosis. But there's still that kind of, people are not aware of what causes cancer. And I've had people disappear from my life, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think some of that is cultural. I've had people disappear from my life who are not Asian as well this time around. And I think we're coming at the end of a year where people have very little capacity, so we have to keep that in mind too. But I do think there's a lot of taboos, as you said, shared about there's no judgment and things like that. Mum, what did you think? Where did you? Because I know you were very open about your cancer diagnosis, which really helped me to be open about mine. But how do you think the culture impacted how you behaved around cancer? You need to unmute yourself.
I had a lot of confidence because Thor said, be open. So the first day I was diagnosed, we rang the family and told them about it. So my very close family knew about it. So we had a lot of support from them. And Thor always had so much knowledge and she read a lot. So that made life so much difficult nutrition-wise. She used to look up different recipes and all the help she gave me. So I am very, very lucky. And as Pradeep said, she lost a few members. So did I, because they couldn't face the word cancer. They couldn't support me. They didn't have the capacity. But then I had a few very, very close friends who were there for me almost every day. And I was lucky. I got 4 sisters, and I had one sister staying with me throughout the year. So I have completely different views compared to everybody else. But I think that helped because I was so open about it. But since then, I've been giving a lot of support to my community, because anybody who's been diagnosed with cancer, they'll say, oh, let's ring Meena. She'll give us advice. Because we didn't have a support group then. But once we started our support group, we hardly had anybody come to the support group who had cancer. But we had a lot of other people who wanted to gain more knowledge about cancer, how to check and what diet and what exercise. So that is my view, and I've always been very open about it. But I've noticed that at my breast cancer support group, up till now, I had very few South Asian women. Up till now, I've been running it for almost 12 years. I've had 3 patients and 1 gentleman. I'm very proud of him because knowing him through my golf, he came to a ladies group having had breast cancer. So some men do talk about it. I wanted him to come onto the panel today, but unfortunately, he didn't respond. And I haven't got any more contacts because these 2 years in the lockdown, I've lost a lot of contacts because I don't run the support group. And people didn't want to come onto the Zoom. I'm very surprised. Other groups have been running through Zoom, but I haven't been able to run it through the Zoom.
Thanks, Mom. Thank you. Girl, now obviously you're treating patients more. What's your experience of how your patients talk about or don't talk about it within their communities?
It's a little bit difficult because when I see the patients in the clinic, I'm seeing them either on their own or just with one member of their family. And I think part of the great thing and also the difficult thing for South Asians is that usually you are part of a much wider community. So what is said in the clinic room with me and maybe a husband or a sister, it's hard to know what then happens outside the clinic. But there are things that I pick up on, such as sometimes when partners are not engaging, it goes back to maybe the men feeling a little bit more uncomfortable about the whole subject. It feels a bit taboo. I had one lady I'll never forget when I was doing my fellowship in Chelmsford, and she needed a mastectomy. She had quite advanced cancer and she had been hiding it, and she always came without her husband, and she was dead set against a mastectomy because she thought her husband would divorce her. She was absolutely terrified about that. And I mean, this is all just taboo and stigma. And I mean, I don't know, maybe that is the kind of person he was. And you do come across this. I think the stats are a third of relationships and marriages break down when somebody is going through breast cancer treatment. And I wonder what that would be for the South Asian community. It may be higher because in general, there is less knowledge. People are more scared about it. There are more taboos around it. As Pardeep was saying, perhaps it's a blame that's given inappropriately, which is just not true. So I do think there is a huge lack of awareness. But I also agree with Meena when she was saying that there is an appetite for information. So I gave a health awareness session for the local mandir, the local temple in Milton Keynes, and I was inundated. I think I ended up giving my talk about 5-6 times because there just wasn't enough space in the room for everyone who wanted to know about things. And slowly, I am seeing it filter through to the men as well. I mean, traditionally they're like, oh no, that's women's work. A bit like, they don't want to help in the kitchen or do the washing up. But things are changing, and they are starting to help in the kitchen, and they are starting to do the washing up, and they are also starting to learn about breast health and breast awareness and supporting the women that they love, and of course for themselves as well, being aware, because 1% of breast cancers are male. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done, but I think there is light, and we just need to grow that.
Thank you, girl. And I'm going to come to you, Daksha, because I have several questions for you. So one is, you are a cancer patient, but you're also a public health specialist. Mum, can you mute yourself? And I wanted to ask you, you kept this a secret. So if you want to share a little bit more about how your culture impacted your cancer diagnosis, but kind of on a wider scale, why do you feel that is?
So thank you, Toral. Yes, in terms of culture, obviously my circumstances were such that my elderly mother not only has lost one son from heart disease who was 45, she also lost another son who was my twin brother from advanced cancer. So as soon as I got my diagnosis, I came out of the hospital, and I don't think I've ever been in that place where I felt that I was completely alone and I could not share this with anybody, given an aggressive diagnosis, which is a poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma. So, in terms of cultural, there is this fear of, the karmic consequences and lifestyle. And immediately the thought that with all my epidemiology, with all the, evidence-based medicine, actually, with all that, you're just a human being from a cultural background at the end of that. And I wanted to protect my mother, who's in heart failure and advanced kidney disease. And I didn't want her to think, oh my God, what does this mean? So that was one thing in terms of cultural thing. But the most important thing that I went through was this thing about fate, assuming the worst. Deepak, my twin brother, went through it and died, and therefore Daksha will go through the same journey. And that stopped me from talking about it. But I also run a cancer support group, which I started as I was writing my book. And I have to tell the viewers today is, let's talk about it, because by keeping it a secret, you conjure up so many ideas. It may never happen, you, by sharing, you do open yourself to accessing health and support, which tells you that you can focus on your well-being, you can focus on your quality of life, and you focus on what you can control, and you let go of what you can't, so you're not thinking of the outcomes and so on. But I have to say, the cancer support group that I run is for people and families with any cancer. And we're sharing the same journey, just with different cultural notions. I know Pradeep's thing about being from her culture background and being silent. I must admit, when I was silent with my extended family, and when I wrote my book and I slowly said to people, I was very apologetic as to why I was silent. I felt I really needed to explain myself. And the other thing that was so important for me, Toral, was genetics. One thing I have to also say to the viewers is, my GP was aware that I had a twin brother who was on end of life care from an advanced stomach cancer. It originated in his esophagus. He was inoperable. And she was aware of my family history. So intuitively, she sent me for early detection, for my endoscopy and everything. Although it was a horror diagnosis, after a 9-hour surgery, here I am. I'm still on my follow-up programs. So again, talk about to treat with people, talk to your GP. They might put you in touch. And then when you are diagnosed with cancer, what happens when you don't talk about it is you're completely alone. In my case, I had 3 months of uncertainty. So I was completely alone in terms of treatment. We weren't sure what the treatment was going to be because of scans and things. And Toral, you also mentioned it's not just about the cultural impact, it's an individual's journey in terms of what happens next. So do we have a timely awareness? I do cancer support work, both with the group but also with Macmillan, in terms of promoting awareness in our communities that it's okay, we are here, we can go through this journey, and everything doesn't have to be about what will happen next or what will happen tomorrow, what will I die, will I live, and that sort of thing. But a huge cultural challenges that you go through, whatever your background, whether you're a surgeon, epidemiologist, public health, you're facing your lifestyle, the families you grew in. But Deep's point about losing friends and people, I mean, I think I experienced that in the beginning because I wouldn't talk about it, but I thought I would try it out. And if I walk in my village and say I've got cancer, there'll be somebody who will not understand it, but there'll be others who've been through it and said, you know what, we didn't do anything wrong, Daksha. And it's like, what did I do wrong? It's a very cultural thing for us. I must have done something wrong, even though the evidence tells us about the genetic access, like if you've got a twin who's got a cancer, then if you're a twin, you've got 35% access and so on. So again, promoting awareness. Toral, you mentioned dietary and nutrition. For an esophageal cancer, for a digestive cancer patient, the only thing that takes you on your journey for your improving your quality of life is how you take your diet and nutrition. And coming from an Asian background, it was Asian foods. It was really difficult, but work with your dietitian, work with your nutritionists to say, let's experiment this because I can only absorb so much food, etc., etc. So again, not just about cultural, but it's about our food, our culture, our perception. I did not talk, but when I wrote my book, I was talking, and it did something to me. It was therapeutic for me. It kept me from emotional and mental stress. I felt that there was an emotional release, that I was a human being, and I really, really felt very light. I carried a burden for so long not talking about it that once I started sharing my story, it not only helped others, but I felt that I was relieved of that burden. So I hope that gives some insight.
No, it really does. Thank you, Daksha, for sharing. It's not about your personal journey, but also about kind of your family history. Because I think, and I want to address that now as well. I think we do have, as South Asians, a real karmic responsibility. And Mom and I talk about this all the time, and that does put emphasis on you and what you've done wrong. And actually that makes it, there's a blame game there, and that's not helpful, and it's very stressful. And we know that stress increases inflammation and can impact disease risk. So that's one part of it. The second thing is genetic. Most cancer is actually spontaneous and sporadic. It's not, and then obviously there's families where it's genetic. In my particular family, we have got a familial link. So we don't have any of the known breast cancer genes. We don't have BRCA1 or 2 or TP53 or any of those. But what we do have is a familial link. And the latest research shows that much of these familial links is based on very tiny, small changes. So these are single DNA based changes, and they're called single nucleotide polymorphisms. And what we know now is if you have families which have breast cancer, and I'm talking particularly about breast cancer, and that's where the research is, are known to have 300 or more of these little changes. And if we all inherit these changes, plus we have the genetic and the epigenetic, and I'll explain that a bit more. So we are all born with genes, but our environment and our diet and our lifestyle can affect that, and stress can affect that. And remember that most of us are either immigrants in our lifetime or our parents were immigrants. And we can inherit that intergenerational epigenetic stress too, and that can affect, our DNA. So we do have to remember that all of that is really important, and the genetic element is, and we have to remind people of that, so we're not taking on the blame. And I have this thought process and conversation, why is this happening to me? Why? Because I've been dealing with this since I was really young. And just kind of going back to that taboo story, when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I was being wheeled down to surgery by a South Asian anaesthetist who mum actually knew. And she said, and I remember this very clearly, Toral, don't worry, I won't tell anybody. I'll know you want to get married. And I kind of was sort of said, A, first of all, Hippocratic oath, you can't tell anyone anyway. And B, why not? I'm going to tell people because they're going to know. If they want to know me and they want to marry me, they've got to know all of me. So these are the kind of taboos that are coming. And this is back in 2006. It's not that long ago, from our own healthcare professionals. So people like us who are all here have to change the story, because those people are saying things like that to patients. It's really damaging. And even until now, and I'm not married, I am single, it has stuck with me that I feel that like there's something wrong with me. I feel mutilated because of all the surgery I've had. And that is something that I think about all the time, even if not actively, it's at the back of my mind. And we have to remember that anything we say to anybody, we don't know how it's going to impact them for the rest of their lives. And particularly as healthcare professionals, it's even more of a responsibility and accountability to that. And this is not a story to like shame people, but it's just to, let's all have a little bit more compassion and kindness to ourselves as well, because I think that's really important. Anyway, I want to ask a few more questions. So, Pardeep, I think one of the things that you and I talked about was kind of lack of the awareness, or the lack of awareness. And I think everyone's touched about this in our conversation. So I really want to, first of all, I want to ask, what taboos did you face? Because there are taboos with cancer. What did you face? What myths, what taboos did you face?
I think we were talking about just generally that we don't talk about breasts. So that is a taboo subject, first of all. And I can remember being diagnosed. And so my husband obviously was born in this country. He went to school in this country. He's got, he's highly educated. But he said to me, "What are you going to tell your boss?" I was like, "Well, I'm going to tell him I've got breast cancer." He says, "But are you actually going to say that?" I was like, "Well, that is what I've been diagnosed with." But he was just very uncomfortable with just the word breast cancer. And my line manager was also an Asian male. And having the conversation with him, he was very much, he just didn't know what to say. And it's just such a taboo subject. And when we were telling family, obviously I told my own family. On my husband's side, he's only got his brother, but he had such a difficult time telling his brother. Again, just because of the taboo around saying the word breast. And we were talking generally, growing up, we never talked about our periods. We didn't talk about our breasts. It was very much a taboo subject. It was silent. I mean, I'm one of 4 girls, and we just didn't talk about periods and breasts until we were older and had left home. We had those conversations, but at home, it was never talked about.
Thank you, Pardeep. Daksha, what about you? What taboos did you think you faced?
I think it's just the fear of what people will think. You grow up in a culture, and I mean, I grew up in a family where even if you've got diabetes, oh dear, where did you get that from? That, which parent did you get it from? And I think it's the fear of how people, your families and your extended families are going to react. You cannot be sure that there's going to be empathy or compassion, but you can be pretty sure that there'll be a karmic judgment somewhere. But and the other thing is, why me? If I can't answer why me, how are they going to? These are the taboos, like, and the word cancer, right? Well, the word cancer means death. Okay, in my case, not only is esophageal cancer relatively uncommon, but it's even more uncommon in Asian people, South Asian, and it's even more uncommon in women who are from South Asian. But here I am, So given that it's relatively, research tells us it's relatively uncommon, how come I've got it? And I'm going to have to explain that. So the word cancer, even with my twin brother, we didn't talk about the word cancer. The other taboo I would have to say is that something about the word cancer and denial. So my mother, even though she did not know about it until I wrote my book and she cried a river, but she was in denial. She continued to stay in denial whilst looking after me. She looked after me for 11 months, trying to get me to eat and drink after a 9-hour surgery. But she was in denial because cancer means you don't talk about it, you just deny it. Because it's not something that it's a taboo, you don't, cancer doesn't happen really, even though she knew that my twin brother had died. But after reading my book and facing the truth of what I'd been through, she learned to accept it, and so I think that's a huge thing. With taboo goes secrecy. With taboo goes, I'll manage this on my own. With taboo it goes, I'm not going to give chance people to judge me in any way. And of course, I thought about it. Oh my God, people will say, I've been a diabetic so long, and I know, well, do cancer cells love sugar? I mean, I've been a diabetic, and is it like, oh, well, they've got diabetes and heart disease and now cancer? And even though my extended families are wonderful people, and given now they've all read my book, we don't talk about it much, but I've had feedback from them, and they've conveyed to me that they completely understand where I was coming from. So I think the fear of what's going to happen, and I think we need to overcome that fear, because do you know what? It may never happen. Those taboos are there. But as Toral said, we need to break that cycle, because we may never be judged. It might just be in our psyche, it might just be in our culture, and it may never happen. But in my book, because I talk about the data, I talk about the epidemiology, I talk about the risks with twin cancers, people understand that it's I don't know if it's a random event or anything, but we know that there are some contributing factors. But one thing I do feel that we need to break the taboos is the importance of lifestyle. That we know that when we eat healthily, we promote our immune system, our anti-inflammatory responses change, and we need to educate ourselves and our families to say, I've got cancer, but I'm not going to focus on the outcome, but I'm going to focus on how I'm going to live through this and give myself a good outcome out of it, a well-being, that I'm here today and I've got a scan. Hey, don't be afraid about it, because it may never happen. And if it does, if I've gone through a 9-hour surgery, I think I can go through a few more follow-ups. And it's education, it's re-education. But I still believe that some of us are professionals here, but each one of us has dealt with our clinical nurse specialists. And I think having a dialogue with our CNSs is so important right from the outset, even to address with taboos. For example, if my CNS knows that I've got a family history, I've got an elderly mother who's in denial, that cancer word is a taboo subject, we don't talk about it because you might have 6 months left or so many months left. If she knows our circumstances, she can maybe help tailor how she talks to us, the holistic needs assessment, and so on, to help us along our psychological and emotional and even spiritual outcomes.
Yeah, thank you, Daksha. No, that's bring up some valuable points. And I do want to address the lifestyle a little bit more later on. Gaurav, go for it.
I just wanted to, just briefly, while we were on taboos, following on from what Pardeep said, just 2 things I wanted to share with you that just occurred to me. Firstly, you're absolutely right. When we grow up, we just don't talk about any of these things in our family. And when I became a consultant and I started doing the breast awareness things, particularly for the South Asian communities, I thought, well, let me try and do my talk in Gujarati, because I'm Gujarati. And although I can speak Gujarati, I had no idea how to say any of the things that I would normally say to ladies in a breast awareness talk. So I sat down with my mammy one weekend and I just learned all the vocabulary I might need. I learned my talk in Gujarati and then just hoped that nobody asked me any questions I didn't know the words for in Gujarati. But it's just because we never talk about these things as we're growing up. And then the other thing that that occurred to me when you were talking about this, Pradeep, was one of the things I did was I filmed a breast examination video with a mannequin to help people understand how to do breast examination, because a lot of people just don't do it because they don't think they know how, or they think they'll do it wrong. And it's basically me with this torso on my lap doing an examination on a mannequin's breast. And then I did it, and then I sent it to all of my family because I thought they should know, and I wanted to know what they thought. And I sent it to all the boys as well as the girls. And then I felt a bit weird about that. I was like, oh my God, I'm sending a video of me like feeling up some fake breasts to all the boys in my family. It's not something we talk about. Like, we don't talk about body parts. And I felt a bit weird about it. And then I just like talked to myself. I was like, come on, girl, this is important. It's about health awareness. And if they learn anything, it's worth all the discomfort and the weird feeling. So I just sent it to them anyway. And bless them, actually, the male cousins, I don't have any brothers, but the male cousins in my family were the only ones who actually messaged back and said, that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. We'll share it with all of our friends. And to pick up on the Daksha, I said, actually, they also, because I did another one about lifestyle and food and exercise to prevent it. And even again, the boys came back to me and said, that's so good that somebody is talking about this, because you don't hear it very often. So as you say, it is weird, but if you get over it, you do get sometimes surprised and just pleasantly stunned by the responses you get from unexpected quarters, even though you feel a bit uncomfortable at the time. So that's
no, really helpful. Thank you, Goral. Quickly, Mum, do you want to give a 30-second answer on taboos and any thoughts you might have?
As we say, we don't talk about it. My husband never talked about it. He couldn't show his emotions, and my son as well. As soon as we asked him to come home, he was at Oxford, and it took him a couple of days to respond. And then when he came home, we had to announce that I got breast cancer, and he disappeared for a while. So he just couldn't agree to the truth that mom's got cancer. So people still find it difficult.
And just kind of adding to that, obviously, because he's my brother, you know, even with my diagnosis, and I've been talking about this with my therapist, it's really clear to see how powerless he feels. And because he feels powerless, which a lot of people, men, women, you know, non-binary, whatever, people often feel powerless. And when they feel powerless, they can disappear, they can retract. And that's why some of these friends and family leave. They also don't know how to deal with it. And sometimes they can also go to attacking and defense mode. And for me, that's kind of been the experience I've had, which has been very difficult, particularly in this pandemic time when I need people more than ever. That's been the response, unfortunately, from some of my male cousins and my brother, is that their powerlessness. And when I've asked for help, albeit maybe not in the right way, it has provoked attack and defense. So it's how we learn to talk about and not being denial about issues, and how we learn to talk as people, how we teach people to talk about things. And mum has always been super open, and it's been really interesting. My dad does not talk, and he will come and show his love by sitting. He's sat at many hospital bedsides with me, but he will literally not say a single word. And it's like, even this time around, like, you know, we're trying to talk a little bit more because mum and I are encouraging, and it's a very difficult conversation. But I do want to move on, because there's so much for us to cover. So one of the things that we've talked about, lack of awareness, and I want to come back to kind of more the healthcare professional kind of view on that, because we are all healthcare professionals. There is a lack of awareness. What do you all see? What do you all think that we need to do about this lack of awareness? Obviously, let's talk about our own stories, but we are actually all healthcare professionals in this room. So, Mum, given that you're off mute already, do you want to just say what you think what we need to do to encourage people to have more awareness?
We should have more funding to give talks to Asian communities, have more classes about diet, exercise, how all these things are important. But NHS funding is very difficult, so we have to try and do it some other way to make people aware.
But then how do you get people to come? Because we also have to get people, you know, one of the things you alluded to is we're running a South Asian cancer support group in South London, and people were not actually attending. So kind of what's your thought on what we can do?
Provide more knowledge, more books,
How
more.
do we encourage them to come? That's what my question.
It's very difficult. It is very, very difficult. You really got to work hard at it.
Yeah. Thank
So
you,
I
Mum.
just don't know
Thank
how
you.
we can do that.
Gaurav, what's your thoughts on this? How do we create more awareness in our community? Maybe where people don't talk about these things.
I think that NHS funding is going to be a pipe dream. So, I mean, all the things that I do in my own time, unfunded, and people just give their time. But the way I've managed to reach people is to tackle them in the environments, in their own environments. So, going to the temple where people go anyway, that was a good place to talk to them about breast awareness. And then people have the opportunity to come and talk to you privately. And then if they have had a cancer and they want to be put in touch with other people, you have that personal time and you can do that while providing a wider awareness to the community. So I think that worked well for the slightly older generation. And then when it comes to the younger generation, I found doing things over Instagram, which you're teaching me about, and Facebook Live, YouTube, things like that, because this is how people look for things in that generation, and it makes people more comfortable, I think, doing things over social media when they are of the social media age. I'm sort of bang in the middle. I'm not quite the older one and I'm not quite the younger one, so I try and reach both with a bit of help.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Daksha, what are your thoughts on how we can create more awareness within our communities?
Well, I have to say that whilst I run a cancer support group, I'm a member of a very thriving Asian women's cancer group. And it's been established for a number of years. And I can clearly see it's an Asian women's cancer group, and it's quite large. And people come regularly. They have speakers from Macmillan, from NHS, from diet, holistic, functional medicine specialists. But one thing is that gels the women together is that we have an understanding of the issues that we all experience. And quite honestly, people tell each other when they have a good experience in this group, they share it with others. They share it with the professionals. I mean, I share about my support group and the Asian Women's Cancer Group with a whole load of people. And one way is to also forge community links, just like Earl said. In our own communities, we talk to our own communities. And I'm actually right now talking to an Asian group in Luton. And one interesting thing Gaurav mentioned was, speaking in your own language. So there was a local Gujarati radio station, and I was asked to give a talk on the Gujarati local radio station. And yes, Gaurav, I had to spend a lot of time preparing the words that were going to be quite effective and powerful. But it certainly brought some of the members together and the health professionals in terms of getting the health professionals to be aware of our groups, and the question of use your networks and your groups to talk about how you've benefited, how other people. The Asian Women's Cancer Group certainly does that. They talk about what helped, what difficulties they had, which professionals could not engage with them, how they could engage more professionals. And I think that constant dialogue. So if I go for my follow-up, I'm having that dialogue with my CNSs, with the health professionals. If I'm having a cancer support group, I invite my own dietitians, my own follow-up health professionals to that. And but I think our groups do need to see one of their own working with the health professionals. It's kind of co-developing together.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience, and I think that could go a long way.
Thank you. And Daksha, what I think what we should do is also, because Macmillan used to collate all the kind of ethnic groups and the different support groups, and they haven't had anyone in place doing that role since Damayanti Patel left about 8 years ago. So they have a diversity and equality person now. So these things, we need to gather this information, because the thing is, it seems to be that the information is really scarce and you have to look for it yourself. So, and I can't find it on the internet. So we'll have to try and collect some of this stuff and share it with some of the South Asian Heritage Month viewers.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think it's not just about collecting information of where the Asian groups are, but I think it's more important than that. We need to collect what the patient's own outcomes are. like the psychosocial, their emotional, the right from the beginning. We don't just want to talk about their mortality or their quality of life. It's right from what the needs are. Remember, in my experience, Asian people will respond according to their needs, but who is going to be there to identify their needs?
Exactly.
And that's why I need to have that working together in partnership.
No, thank you, Daksha. I think you've brought up some valuable points. Pardeep, you're obviously a pharmacist and you see probably a lot of patients and you're in the community. What do you think? How do we get awareness and how can we bring this to the wider public?
So I think it's really about education, and also I think from a younger age. So the people that I will see in a pharmacy tend to be a little bit older. But a friend of mine did some work with a secondary school. So similar to me, she had a diagnosis, and she was about 40 years old and didn't talk about her diagnosis, but then was asked by a local secondary school to go in and talk to the I think it was the sixth form group about her diagnosis. And it was the first time she'd ever spoken about it. So it was quite powerful. So I think we really need to catch younger adults, and all about education. We do a lot in the pharmacy. We do what we call health promotion campaigns, but they don't go far enough. So we might have, in October, we always do a breast cancer awareness month, but we have leaflets in the pharmacy. We dress in pink. And that's as far as it goes. We don't go far enough. So it really is about getting that awareness at a younger age.
And I think given that you and I both, I found my breast cancer from checking my breast at a very young age through my mum. And I know Copperfield as a charity goes to schools and universities, but I feel like, again, do you not think it would be helpful to have people from our own communities, whether it's South Asian for us and obviously Black for Black people, because there is the poor outcomes and the late diagnosis because of the lack of awareness. So I think that's a conversation. Actually, the Copperfield office is around the corner from my house, so I'm going to take that to them because I do think that's a really important conversation. So thank you, Pardeep. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to ask one other question. Is about myths from our community. So there's been a lot of myths around cancer and unhelpful advice, I want to say, about diet and lifestyle. So I really want to kind of explore that before we talk a little bit more about diet and lifestyle. So what myths have you guys faced? Let's go back to Pardeep. What myths about unhelpful advice? And if you guys can try and keep it kind of like a short answer, that'd be great.
Okay, so I've got twins. So it's because I had twins that I have now got cancer. And because I had twins, everybody thought I had IVF and I didn't. So it's because I had IVF, even though I didn't, and that's why I had the cancer. And just general, it's anything really. So we've never lived with our in-laws, and it's always been, because she's not been very nice to her mother-in-law. So it's that kind of, that karma. It's things that I've done and it's laughable at times, but at the time you think, why would they think that?
No, it's crazy. Quickly, Daksha, I see you absolutely laughing your head off. You want to give us a quick answer to that question?
Well, I'm laughing because I come from evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine. And even though, it's like, if it works for you, if you eating in a well, or you are not stressful and you've got positive thoughts, then your immune system will be better and your outcomes will be better. In terms of myth that, if you've got twins in the family, if one's got cancer, the other one will. Hey, where does that come from? Because, clearly you can see my twin brother and I have had completely different outcomes. So I do sympathize with that. And the other thing, the reason I was laughing is the causality. I mean, there are mechanisms which we all understand. Why does A cause B? And why is A associated with B? And unless we see that kind of experience and evidence, it is shocking to hear that people will form these myths and ideas, because I think it's to deal with trying to understand disease from a karmic point of view. She must have been so worried. She was stressed. She's got a twin. Well, perhaps, this is what fate and destiny has decided. So, that is a huge thing about myths. And, You know, even if you don't have hardcore evidence, let's go with the experience of people. And that's, again, talking about cancer means you're going through real life experiences, means what's working for you. You know, if meditation works for you, it calms you down, it has an impact on your immune system, that's good, because it helps your well-being.
100%, absolutely. Gora, I want you to come in with that. What are your answers to the myths?
So a couple of thoughts. Firstly, and I think this is quite common in the South Asian community. It's sometimes the family come up with all kinds of not very helpful advice. And a couple of the ones that I've come across that I've really struggled against, because there's what I say to my ladies in clinic and then what they're being told by their family. So one of them is encouraging them to take on a sick role. And I definitely see this in breast cancer, particularly the ladies who are having surgery or chemo. And they're encouraged to just take to their beds and not do anything and just, you know, oh, I'm a wilting flower. And all of the evidence is actually, if you continue doing half an hour of exercise a day or 2.5 hours a week, you come through your treatment with fewer side effects, with less fatigue. But unfortunately, when you're being told by close members of family, no, you've had your chemo today, you need to just lie in bed for a few days, it's counterproductive. And then they end up feeling worse, because by lying in bed, it actually it stops them bouncing back from the treatment. And it's the same like when I do surgery, I'm a big advocate for day case surgery and quick recovery. I don't leave people with drains. Most of my cases, mastectomies, even reconstructions now, I day case them, because I want them to be back in their own environment, walking to the toilet, just doing these little things that are going to bring their functionality back, their quality of life back. They do not need to lie there not doing anything. They don't need to not use their arms even to brush their teeth. They can do all of these little things. And I find sometimes I'm fighting against other members of their sort of support network who are saying, no, you mustn't do anything for a good 2 weeks. I think, no, you have to sort of gently but get back to normal, carry on doing things. And the other one that I come across that I also fight a bit against is certain things that you eat, like fad diets, or I think somebody had stopped eating egg yolks, and I was like, you don't need to do this. Yes, have a rainbow diet, have lots of fruit and vegetables. Yes, go for some of the superfoods if you want to, but don't cut out huge portions of what you would normally have. I mean, certain things, yes, cut down on your sugars and your processed foods, absolutely. But I mean, I think I was looking up the nutritional content of an egg for one of my family members, and all the good bits.
It's in the yolk. It's all in the vitamin D, and all the good stuff is in the yolk.
Exactly. Lectin, all of it. It's in
all of it's in the yolk.
You're
So
only getting half the benefit. So it's just little things like this. And as a scientist, I know vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, and so it's going to be in the yolk. But if you're not, then you may just not really understand this. And I had one lady who lost a huge amount of weight because she put herself on this complete fad diet during her chemo. And then she came around, she was a BRCA lady, so she wanted bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction. And she came around for a surgery, and she'd lost so much body fat that I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to reconstruct you?
Yeah,
what have you done with all the fat?
Exactly. Mum,
you don't want to be overweight. You do need to be in a healthy condition.
Yeah, and I've had the same with some of my patients too, and it's crazy. And like some of the myths I've had to leave my family WhatsApp group because of the people that send all the information. If you gargle with turmeric, it'll cure your cancer and COVID and everything else. I'm like, literally, I'm going to smack you. On that note, Mum, I'm going to ask you for a 30-second response to that question. Like, what kind of dietary myths? Obviously, you didn't have much choice with me around, but like, I know people did say stuff to you.
People would say stress. Tell Toral not to be stressed. That will help her. You see, my family would say that. So I think it's not only that, it's so many other things. So it's very difficult, as everybody's mentioned, all these myths to convince the family about.
Great, thank you. And what I'm going to do now is, I mean, we've got very short time, is I'm going to quickly show a couple of slides about diet and nutrition. And then I'm going to come back for some kind of closing remarks more of you. So Ruby, I'm going to ask to share my presentation. And then we have got very short amount of time. So let me just share my screen very quickly. Share screen. Oops, where is the thing? The thing is here. Sorry, how do I do that? Sorry, you have to give me a second because I'm a little bit not great at window. Here we go, cancer nutrition. Share. Right. So I'm just going to really quickly show a couple of slides because we just don't have much time, and I really wanted to talk a little bit more about nutrition and lifestyle. But we've mentioned that cancer is a genetic disease and it involves mutations to your DNA. So I really wanted to share that. And obviously factors that include those mutations are tobacco, smoking, UV light, viruses, age, and then there's also like mutations that can just happen sporadically and throughout damage to cells in our life, and that's important. But with cancer, what increases the risk? We know that the lack of activity, lack of exercise, having a poor diet, including saturated fat and sugar, exposure to the sun, obesity and weight. And these are all things that we can look at in any community, but particularly in our South Asian diet, where we often can be eating a lot of processed and kind of foods with a lot of white flour and things like fried things. So we need to remember that diet and lifestyle has a massive impact. Just to give a little kind of snapshot, nutrition and diet can affect approximately 35% of all cancers. So we need to, things that increase the risk are these like sugar-filled foods, refined flour products, in stomach and colon cancer, the consumption of red meat, and then having imbalance of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. But what we can do to decrease risk is having what we call the Mediterranean or Japanese dietary pattern. Now, what I've realized is the resources aren't there to translate that into the Indian diet. So I'm going to announce something in a second, but we need high levels of fiber and antioxidants in vegetables and olive oil. And our Indian diet and our South Asian diet can provide that because we do eat a wide variety of vegetables, but we just need to increase the variety we have. We need to increase cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and things like that. And if we don't eat fish because we're vegetarian, we need to supplement with a kind of fish oil or a supplement. So we know the gut microbiome is really important too, and that means increasing the fiber, having probiotics, so things like chash and buttermilk and your live yogurt and all of those things like achars and pickles can really make a difference. So, but exercise is particularly important, and this slide just quickly shows us that diet can be a source of carcinogens and change our genes, but it can also help us as well. So we need to really think about it. And I will go into this in more detail. This is just me doing a triathlon, but we know that exercise reduces cancer risk for multiple kind of mechanisms. But also, as Gaurav alluded to, having exercise through your treatment makes a difference. I went on my spin bike every single day, 2 hours before I did my radiotherapy, and I'm definitely sure that it helped to reduce the side effects. And in Australia, they actually prescribe exercise alongside. So again, like the Indian diet, and I don't have a picture of this, and I'm going to update this to share that. It's like, it can lead to weight gain, hormone imbalance, insulin resistance, changes to our gut microbiome and inflammation. And I'm going to share more about that. So I'm going to leave my, stop sharing now. I'm just going to leave you with an update. So how can our diet help? We need to eat a diet rich in a variety of different fruits, vegetables, herbs, nuts, seeds, and plant-based foods, at least half our plate. We need 2 portions of oily fish a week if we eat fish. We need to avoid red and processed meat. Taking a vitamin D supplement is super helpful from October to April, and actually our UK government now suggests that. Improve our gut health by increasing plant-based and fermented foods and probiotics. Limit alcohol consumption, reduce free and refined sugar intake, eat unprocessed soy products, and drink at least 2 liters of water. And I'm going to stop sharing now and come back to our panel. So there's so much we can do. And what I've realized is that not all the resources are there. And we need to, join forces with all these different South Asian groups. But one of the things I've realized is that cancer organizations and charities haven't been providing tailored advice for breast cancer or any cancer patients. So I'm very excited to be partnering up with Penny Brohn, and we are now going to be running from September onwards tailored diet and lifestyle events for the South Asian community, specifically to our diet. And I'm really excited about this collaboration. So we're going to everyone will be attending, and we will be sharing more about this, so you can invite all your communities to join, so we can do it. And my mom's gonna help me, and we're gonna do part of it in Hindi and Gujarati, so that will hopefully bring more people onto the thing. So there's the last finishing comments, because we've only got a couple of minutes left. And what I want to ask is, to all of you, what do you think's missing? Whether it's, you've got 30 seconds each. Is it data? Is it information? What do you think's missing in the South Asian cancer experience? And I'm going to come to Gaurav first. So Gaurav.
I think it's down to what all of you have said, is the conversation. Talk about it. Don't hide. Talk about it. And that way you will grow the data, the experience, the resources. But if you just ignore it, you don't acknowledge it, you run away from it, you feel you can't talk about it, then we're not going to move forward. So I think it's the conversations that need to be had, whether they're online, whether they're in person, whether they're in communities. But we need to just break the taboo of cancer.
Thank you. And Pardeep.
I think similar to what Gaurav said, it's about obviously having that information out there and the data. So just because we don't see women or men from a South Asian background on TV or on social media who have had a cancer diagnosis, doesn't mean that it won't happen to us. So I think it's really important that going forward, we see more in terms of the people from the same cultural backgrounds talking about their cancers.
Thank you very much. Mum? Mum, you're muted.
Spread the word around and talk about it, so people are more aware of it.
Thank you, Mum. And Daksha, last but not least, we always have so much knowledge.
Thank you. No, I think there is a gap between the health professionals and the South Asian patients. And that bridging that gap is really key to how we move forward to break down all the barriers. I'd just like to say about the diet thing you mentioned is it's individually tailored, because when you've got esophagectomy like I've had, it's not really about South Asian foods or whatever. It's really what you can absorb, what you can't. So I'm looking forward to your diet series, because again, that needs to be individually tailored to the type of surgery you've had.
Thank you so much. And I do, when I work with individual patients, we obviously tailor it. And I think for me, what's missing is the data. What I've noticed is they do not collect ethnicity data a lot at the hospital. So how do we know whether things are improving? For example, with radiotherapy, my burns occurred much later than white Caucasian people. They said that would happen within a week, and actually mine happened after 2 weeks. So I think we need to collect the data and then be able to share that, statistically look at it and then share appropriate advice information. That means training healthcare professionals to understand our communities, as Daksha said, as Gaurav said, so as everyone said, but really to train and they have that connection. So I really want to leave it there and just say a huge thank you to all of you for joining me on this Friday morning to share more about your personal experiences and also your professional experiences. And if we have more people like you, I think we can reach a lot of the South Asian community and make a difference. So thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing it. And everyone else, follow us and we'll be sharing more South Asian Heritage Group. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I think we're still live, so I'm going to leave the studio. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.